He is the director of the Center for Pediatric Clinical Research and Development at Nemours Children's Hospital in Delaware Valley. He is going to talk to us about Nemours resources for clinician scientists.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate the two talks that went before. I think a lot of it resonates a lot with me, what Dr. Hostetter and Dr. Alexander were talking about. My part here is to talk at least about some of the resources that we're building and that are available for clinician scientists. I'm Rob Akins up in the Delaware Valley. So I'm going to split this. I don't have anything to disclose that's relevant to this talk. I'll split this into 3 parts, and I'm going to go rapidly. And I will tell you, I designed this to be shared. So there's PDFs available. I tried to put QR codes and links for some of the things that I'm talking about, or just about all of them. So if you have it printed out, you can use the QR code. If you have the PDF, you can click on the QR code and it should link. Let me tell you, I thought that idea was going to be easy to do. That was actually quite complicated, but it all works. So I'm going to talk about Nemours resources, the center it's going to be in its 15th year, the Center for Clinical Research and Development and the Scientist Development Program, some of the offices and processes. I will go through quickly some of that. There were multiple presentations, but I just wanted to aggregate at least some of the resources, especially for clinician scientists. If your resource is not included here, I apologize in advance. So I don't talk about human subject protection, for example, or that office, which is a great resource. I tried to focus on things that were sort of related to the Scientist Development Program from my perspective. All right, so CPCRD, it's been around since 2009. That's the QR code if you want to try an easy one. It goes to the link here. We have an office, it's down in GE 120 in the hospital here. That center is basically myself, but running it with some Aaron Riegel and a few other people helping out. But the rationale from that, the why we put that together and why I've sustained it, right? This is sort of a labor of love in addition to the research, which I have a research hat that I wear also. But it was clear to me, it's becoming more and more clear that it's just getting increasingly difficult to navigate landscapes for career advancement, for RVUs, how do you get external funding? NIH processes are getting more and more complicated. We're in Forms H now, and those are every iteration. It takes a little bit of time to get used to them. Publishing, predatory publishing, how to get published, and administrative and regulatory requirements. They never go backwards. The experienced faculty that would typically mentor for me, kind of growing up, they're more strapped for time and have to focus on their own research and their own academic progress. And in fact, NIH data and a lot of data suggests that there's sort of a dearth of mid-career researchers and scientists, especially in certain subspecialties and in areas of research in the country, pediatrics being one of them, where we're very bottom heavy. There's a lot of interest, a lot of ideas, not as many people who are able to, who've gone through it and are able to help. So to serve as role models, coaches, and mentors. So it's becoming progressively harder to initiate and sustain an academic career. There are data supporting this. I'm a nerd, so I'm going to give you some data. There's every 6 years is a survey done on faculty work. So it's the Faculty Work Survey. You can find it if you're interested in that QR code. So the column graph just shows you the amount of time allocated for research that's actually spent not doing research. Right? Some things you have to do, administrative processes, you have to fill out reports, you have to fill out forms, you have to write new grants. But the amount of time that investigators at top institutions, so this is the amount of time spent with highly funded investigators at top institutions, has been creeping up. It's now around 44%. And that's, again, at strong institutions. In places where we're still building, that number is a lot higher. And the Cohen's data is really going up. So it's significant. It's a big study. So that means if you have you're spending 20 hours a week, only 10 of those is actually doing research. So one of the ideas for the center and all of the things that we're doing is to drive that down, give back more time to do effective research so we can increase productivity for the clinician scientists in particular. And we do that by efficiencies. We can't do that alone. Research administration is actively trying to work on this. Everybody's trying to figure out how do we increase productivity and drive down the amount of this sort of burden that's on people. We can put infrastructure, program support, training programs, and some of the things we're building that I'll talk about are peer and near-peer mentoring support networks, connections for mentoring resources and coaching, educational opportunities, especially around grant writing, team science, research leadership, and support, pieces of support that can help offset some of the early burden. So the new investigator, which Dr. Hostetter mentioned, just joining an institution should know who their mentor is. So we're really trying to do that and get transitional people in place for when a clinician scientist joins. But we also want kind of hired guns to help them along the way, so they don't have to beat their head against the wall trying to figure out a process. They can just execute the process. All right. We've been reasonably successful, the CPCRD, we've been reasonably successful. So all the way on the left are 3 grants, and I'll talk about in a little bit, that we've been able to use. So that plus the office at Nemours, and these are some of the programs that we have, and we've been, pretty good at getting some external funding for that. I want to highlight these Mentored Research Development Awards, which are right now only in Delaware Valley. Sorry about that. But this is short-term release time from non-research responsibilities to get you out of a couple clinics for a short amount of time to write a grant and get that grant submitted. I'll talk to you about the outcomes from that program in a second. We have a junior investigators network now, which is being fostered to be a near-peer mentoring network. But there are about 300 faculty. I don't know how many from Florida, but there are several from Florida, Nemours, that are registered, and from our academic partners, these mostly in the Delaware Valley. We have more than 100 online accessible educational tools. I'll show you a few of those in a second. There's it's called the JIN, Junior Investigators Network, although it's mostly not junior investigators anymore. When I tried to change the name, I got voted down by a lot. People like the name JIN. In our newsletter, which has 261 subscribers, if you'd like to get it, I'll tell you how in a second, called Gin and Topics. So the pub that was shown, that Ken showed, this sort of a virtual kind of idea for our connection. And we do outreach to clinicians as they're joining. So during credentialing, whether you've seen it or not, if you're new, there was an email that came in from Aaron Riegel and the Gin. And we help with grant preparation and project support. So again, some of this stuff, it's a little bit of a catch-22. I didn't know what to tell you first. So I'm telling you some of the results that we got and what's happening in the office, and I'll explain what these mechanisms are. By supporting investigators at Nemours, we were able to increase the number of practicing physicians who could compete for these pilot awards from this INBRI mechanism. Practicing clinicians were submitting, they just weren't getting them. And it wasn't because they had bad ideas, or it wasn't because they had bad sort of research. It was because no one was really helping them write the proposal. So just infusing that ability and working with clinicians to write their pilot proposal, we increased the number of physicians from 1, which was over about 15 years of this program. Only 1 ever got funded, to 7 in the last couple of rounds. And right now, I think there's 4 who have this funding in-house. And we have I'm trying to place this person, but we have help. The funding, again, is Delaware Valley right now, but there's a clinical coordinator role, and I'm trying to refill, where someone who's coming in can engage this person short term. They're not going to enroll patients for you, but they can help you figure out how do you get a DUA, how do you get an MTA, what paperwork do I need to submit for the IRB, to try to overcome some of those barriers. So those are resources that are available through the CPCRD office up here. Let me go back. The GIN has weekly meetings, which right now we only have 1 weekly meeting. It's at 9 a.m. on Thursdays, which I know is not great. Again, whenever I try to change something, the blowback is pretty bad. So we're going to at least keep the 9 a.m. Thursdays. We may add another one. But during those meetings, researchers present a short vignette. We hope they're about 10 minutes. Sometimes they talk a little longer. And those are posted on a YouTube channel as a way for us to share connections between individuals. So the 8 on the right, those are presentations done by Nemours faculty recently, and they were posted and they're available. SDP is Scientist Development Program, so the playlist is there. You have to hunt around a little bit. I mean, we're trying to figure out how to curate it a little better. So if you're looking for something in particular, let us know, but you can go take a look at the channel there. But these are turning out to be a great way to get people connected. The clinician comes and they talk at the gym in this Thursday morning meeting. They interact with that group, and then the YouTube video is posted and we can direct people to it so they can get linkages. We also have, these are recorded and we offer these real time too. So we have grant writing workshops. That's Amy down here. She's kind of got blocked a little bit. She's a colleague at the University of Delaware, an excellent researcher and educator. So she's right now teaching flipped classroom fundamentals of effective grant writing. So if you're interested, let me know. I think it's not too late to join if you want to join, and we would love to have more people take advantage of it. You can do this course from Florida. There's nothing that restricts you from taking advantage of the resource that we're building in Delaware. We have talks on timelines for writing Ks. We have talks on you getting your ORCID profile up and running, DMP tools, the data management planning tools. This is one I did recently about defining roles for authorships and contributors. And then we invite people based on needs from the junior investigators to come up and give us talks. So we had one on applying for PCORI funding. So those, and again, they're open. We're trying to figure out how to advertise more to the Florida folks so they can join us remotely. They're open, and then once we're done, those things are published. Well, they're recorded and they're available. If you want to join the GIN podcast, we call it a podcast, sort of, but you can email Aaron Riegel, and there's a QR code in a second. Those meetings, again, are they're Thursdays at 9 a.m. every Thursday except Thanksgiving, or if there's another holiday that lands on a Thursday. And we typically is about 20 people that join us, and it kind of floats around. But there's the presentation, there's announcements, reminders, and then there's an open discussion at the end of any challenges that are being seen by the scientists on the call. All right, some outcomes. This is a lot that we've been putting into this. And I mentioned that, 7-fold increase in our ability to fund clinician scientists by providing what we call flight school. So if you want to be a pilot, you take flight school, we can help you get your grant. Danielle Hachimonji is pictured here as a junior clinical investigator in Ann Kazak's group, and she's helping us out with a paper. This is in revision. So I mentioned that MRDA program that offsets a little bit of time to work on a grant. It's not research, it's grant writing. But when we did that over these number of years, I think 61 total, 55 years, total 65% of the folks who did that, the grant submitted as part of the MRDA were funded. That is a spectacular result. So she just got back. This is in revision for the Journal of Clinical Translational Science. So that's huge. The ROI on MRDAs, right? We're taking somebody out of clinic. So it's hard to monetize exactly what that costs. So the division chief has to be on board with it. But the ROI that we've seen so far for grants coming back to Nemours after that, at least the salary part of that offset is about 8. So that program has been remarkably successful. And as an example of the prototypical investigator, Krista Baker-Smith joined Nemours actually during COVID, but she engaged with the CPCRD and the professional development program before she arrived here, which is what we really want. And we were able to help her. So there's a great manuscript she just had in JAMA Network Open on hypertension, but we were able, she did it, right, to be clear. We just directed her and she went and got it, but we were able to connect her with the resources and give her some help to do it. A small pilot award, a full pilot award, what's called a Core Access Award to go look at data, the Medicaid data. A program which I think is actually going to go away called FASTAR. It's a faculty startup program to help her purchase some blood pressure monitors for research. She got that. And now she's got an INBRI administrative supplement that we just had a really simple just-in-time request for today. So she'll be able to do her first trial with the ambulatory blood pressure monitors. But those are all things that were leveraged. Again, she did it. She's the one moving the mountains. We're just kind of helping her and giving her some tools to do it. But all of those interactions were through the CPCRD and the programs that we have. I'm going to try this. I don't know. So you say it doesn't play when you click on it? Let's see. This is Lee Fan. It might work. I'm going to try this. Let's see if it works. All right, so here's another testimonial. It's not just me telling you.
So my name is Lee.
Oh,
Fawn. I am an associate professor of pediatrics here at Nemours Children's Health, along with the Sidney Kimmel Medical College at TJU. I'm also a research scientist with the Nemours Center for Healthcare Delivery Science and an attending physician in our Nemours Weight Management Clinic. So I got into research because I was in our weight management clinic and I was seeing patients and really felt like there was a need to better engage patients in treatment and reduce some of the disparities in care. So I utilized the ESSEL program's MRDA. So that's the Mentored Research Development Award. So right out of fellowship, I applied for the MRDA. Luckily, I got it. And it afforded me two things. So one is just the protected time as a clinician to really kind of accelerate my research. It allowed me the time to write a K award grant, which luckily got awarded because of that opportunity to really have the time to focus in and hone in on writing that proposal. And so without that, I don't know where I would be today, honestly, because as a clinician, you really need that time to focus on expanding your research career, learning the research skills that you need to really be successful as an investigator. And so having that protected time was invaluable. The second thing that MRDA afforded me was the opportunity to be mentored by really amazing mentors at Nemours and throughout the state of Delaware to really hone those research skills, learn what it is to be an investigator. So I think anybody kind of first starting in their career, it's important to think about, we're so focused on when you're first, doing your first project, really getting the details down and really focusing on the nitty gritty. I would tell the junior investigators instead to focus on the big picture. Just think about, where do you want to be 10 years from now? We're so focused on the here and now, but you really need to think about 10 years from now, where do I want to be? What's the impact that I want to have? And how does that relate to the research at hand, but what I want to do in the future and the skills that I need to develop and the connections that I need to develop.
so I didn't even remotely follow what Allie did, so she's going to do it in reverse now. But Lee's, so I wanted to show you that. So Lee reported that last summer. Lee's doing great, and she's also it's sort of a testimonial to what can happen if we can get enough support early on. And that's really the focus that we're trying to do. She is now leading clinical trials. In fact, she is very active in one of the Idea State's pediatric clinical trials networks that I'm going to mention here in a second. So if you want to get involved with the CPCRD, there's some more things coming that I'll talk about at the end. Erin loves this picture, but she's not in the room. Is to email Erin Regal. So she's right now the central point of contact. She may not be the person that ultimately helps you, but we're trying to make sure that if you need something, she can either help you, she's aware of it, or she can directly connect you. And that QR code should get you to her email. All right. I'm going to go through quickly here. You can stop me if you want me to talk more about this, but I mostly wanted to get this onto the slides for folks to have it into the PDF. There's an amazing research toolkit, and there's some websites coming. The updates in the websites for research admin and the core access are great, so they're coming. But the research toolkit you can get to from the main page. It's very simple. You can also get to that QR code. Once you get there, I know this is really small, it's just a snip, but it has a whole bunch of information. There's sort of a spectrum across the top of information that you can click on. And it allows you to link to things. So the ITP that Ken mentioned, you can link to right through the SharePoint link. So if you don't know where else to go, when you're trying to figure something out with research, the toolkit is a great place to start. The ITP takes you directly to here, which you all would notice. We'll probably recognize as, and it is the place to start so that you make sure you engage all of the mechanisms within Nemours that you need is the intent to pursue. The toolkit is wonderful. Heidi Kex-Gamethi should be called out in particular. There was a lot of people that worked on it, but Heidi really championed that and pushed for it years ago. There's within, and I know there were several presentations about clinical research coordination and the initiation of clinical research. There's an amazing clinical research resources SharePoint site that Kim Engler and Kristen Gibbs and a lot of people worked on that you can get to. I think this will only work on a Nemours computer. You can let me know how it works. But when you click on this link, it takes you right to a publicly accessible set of information, including things like the magic decoder ring of abbreviations, your contact list. How do I get started? What are the pathways through how to get clinical research up and running? So that's an amazing resource that you can link to on SharePoint. Back out here. If you are unaware of what the Nemours library provides, you should be aware. It's pretty fantastic. That QR code will get you there. This is their main page, and there's tons of resources here, including things you can see on the right, clinical key, the JAMA evidence. They have a new program called Goals, so you don't have to read all of this. This is just directly off of their site. These are small grants for open access publishing. In fact, on the way here, I was stopped in the hallway about this program and how to access it. It costs money to publish open access. We have a lot of conversations about that with the Junior Investigators Network. Christina Flathers and the folks in the library have some resources for you if you need help to make sure that you can cover those costs. They can also, if you don't know what an ORCID is, please talk to me or look it up. If you're active academically, you need an ORCID profile, and they are the ones that can really help you get that set up. It is, a calling card that everybody needs to have who's active in academics and research in particular. All right, so that's the library. Is ongoing work in the Office of Sponsored Projects. This is another link back to the intent to pursue. So Missy Baker and Shakita Wilder, this is probably not even up to date anymore because they're tweaking and changing and adding and changing things around. So this is sort of an org that might be a little bit older, but they're a great resource. The way you engage that office is through filling out an ITP so that they can start helping you with budgets and getting submissions together. I know you all know that, but I wanted to lead into this DMP, Data Management Planning tool, which Shakita Wilder is helping manage the front end of. It's required now when you submit an NIH grant that you have a data management plan. That's since January of this year. This DMP tool is required for you to submit through Nemours. So it's actually a pretty helpful interface, and Shakita's done a great job and continues to work on advancing how the DMP tool is used at Nemours. So this is just a quick snapshot. I just went in. I don't think Nemours is available yet as an organization you can select that's being worked on, but you can click organizations you want to see recommendations from. And as you're going through the different parts, margin notes pop up. Here's the wording, here's the boilerplate, here's what you need to do, here's the office you need to contact. So it's great. And in terms of the project, the plan itself, you have to keep track of research outputs and link them. It's all sort of managed through this tool. So that QR code will take you right to the DMP tool. And Shakita Wilder in OSP is leading part of this. There's amazing resources. There was a great panel discussion yesterday. I think all of these cores, instrumentation methodology cores, will be represented on the new website when it finally comes out. In fact, I know they will, but there are amazing resources available through cores. I don't know if you can see it. There's a kind of a dim, maybe you can't see it, image in the back there. That's some data that we got from the genomics laboratory recently that I'm pretty excited about. So there's email address, contacts here for the different cores. If you get the PDF, there's notes that explains what all the cores do. I'm not going to go through all of that. So there's multiple pages of notes sort of attached to this. Also, this is just Delaware Valley. Judy Ross talked about this yesterday, and I told her I would stick a quick slide in here. There are pediatric awards for clinical research with Jefferson up in the Delaware Valley. Ken mentioned some other opportunities, which I'm sorry I don't have. I would be happy to include them in future iterations of this resource. The resource down in Florida also, but this PACR grant mechanism is a good opportunity for folks in the Delaware Valley to look for pilot funding. All right, so let's switch now and talk about some of the externally funded programs that I'm affiliated with and how people can access them. The first one, so I'm going to talk about IDEA programs. Dr. Hostetter mentioned it. Even folks in Florida should be aware of it, because the fact that Nemours and Delaware Valley can get these funds and build these resources is of value to Florida, because although we can't spend the money down there, you can certainly take advantage of the resource. So if we're having a program here, for example, professional development program for best practices in mentoring, which we're going to do, folks in Florida can join. We just can't pay a clinical coordinator down there. We can't move the money down to Florida. But the IDEA program is about 30 years old. It was mandated. It's an institutional development award program mandated by Congress. And it's to direct funds to states that are historically underfunded, and not just sort of amplitude underfunded. We just never catch up. And that's because of the way funding flows. And if you don't have great infrastructure, it's hard to catch up with great infrastructure. So it's funding to help us strengthen biomedical research, to enhance competitiveness for research funding, which is one of the things I work on a lot, because that's how we catch up. It's not these grants the IDEA grants don't help us as much as the ripple effects of the IDEA grants, getting more Ks, more Rs in the institution. It enables some clinical and translational research with underserved communities. And it is the direct fund expenditures are earmarked for IDEA states, but the programs that we develop are broadly available. In fact, we're encouraged to use those programs to support other states. So there's 3 different kinds of IDEA mechanism. I'm going to talk about the newest one first, which isn't even funded by NIGMS. It's a national network that's addressing problems in IDEA states. So this is the IDEA. It's ISPCTN, IDEA States Pediatric Clinical Trials Network. Nemours' participation in this was pioneered by Judy Ross. I've joined her as MPI recently. Lee Fan actually runs a number of these programs, so you'll see her name here in 2 of these clinical trials that we were able to execute across the networks. There's 18 different states. She did the work here in Delaware and actually leads some of the national programs. It addresses disparities in pediatric research, including children from rural and underserved populations in clinical trials. There's 5 key areas, which you can see up here. These, for reasons that I'm happy to discuss, these are the ECHO target areas. And Nemours has participated in 4 trials as a top enroller so far, and here are the names of those trials. One of the things we're working on with ISPCTN that will be a benefit to all of Nemours is using those resources and sort of some resources that are coming through the CPCRD to develop pathways and roadmaps so that people can navigate their way through clinical trials. There's also mentoring and development of pilot proposals through the ISPCTN. There are working groups, and these are across the 18 states. And with the list of the folks who are participating in those working groups, Nemours folks, there's a monthly Outcomes That Matter council meeting, which I think investigators from Florida have joined. And there's a bunch of online webinars and conferences, which there's a whole bunch of them. I will tell you how to get to as soon as they finish restructuring the website. So it's going to be in the next few weeks. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So that's what happens when you click on the QR code. We do want to know from everyone at Nemours, I'm going to leave this one up for a few seconds. We want to know about your clinical trials ideas. One of the things that the ISPCTN is about multi-site trials, but we need a pipeline. We want to establish a pipeline, and we want to help people who have that idea in mind, even if it's in the future. So there is a REDCap survey. It is not long. It's relatively easy to fill out. And really what we're looking for is if you have an idea, you have pilot data, you've run a single site trial and you want to go multi, or you just want to connect with people about these kinds of trials, go to the survey and let us know. We have an opportunity with ISPCTN to help direct trials that involve the Delaware site, national trials. that are driven by clinicians at Nemours. So even if you're in Florida, we want to know, and we can talk to you about how we might be able to take what you're working on and thinking about to mesh it with ISPCTN. So I actually mentioned this already. This is coming soon, the roadmaps and pathways. So these are self-guided tools to help people get up and running with clinical trials. All right, that's ISPCTN. So that's the national, 18-state national network. The other two types of programs that the IDEA program sponsors, I used this analogy yesterday, but sort of like think Senate, every one of the 23 states gets one of these. And then there's sort of House of Representatives ones that are, institutionally, as many institutions you have who compete for them, you can get as many as you can compete for. So I'm going to talk about the two networks, statewide networks first. So one is the Clinical and Translational Research Network. That is an IDEA program. So the funding is earmarked for Delaware. I'm Rodney Scott's the site PI here. I lead the professional development core for this. So it's infrastructure and resources around health challenges in underfunded states. There's collaborations. It's about $4 million a year of NIH funding, and then more money comes in from the state. We're waiting to hear, we just got a score of 21 for our competing renewal to go into year 11. So that's what the CTR is, organization of institutions in the state of Delaware around clinical and translational research. It offers pilot funds. These pilot funds are only available to Delaware Valley. Sorry about that. Right now, there is a mechanism, but this will be announced again. So the pilot funding is $8,000 for 1 year. They have community engagement pilot grants. It's also $80,000, but it's $40,000 a year for 2 years. They offer shovel-ready grants. That's if you have an A1 that needs some additional help, you can get some funding to make sure that you can get data to submit your revised grant. There's some new collaborations that are coming, and they have what are called orbits, which are overcoming barriers to translational success, and think infrastructure, equipment, software, one-time purchases. On the right, there's just a list. These are the areas that are largely served by CTR based on demographics in the state, based on the, these are the pilots we funded based on areas of interest to us in the state of Delaware. The professional, so the pilots, we can't send pilots to Florida. The professional development core, though, folks in Florida, and highly encourage folks to get in touch with us and participate. So we offer awards, we have networking events, we have our Gin and Topics newsletter and those phone calls I talked about. We do grant every 6 months or so. We run a grant writing 101 set of courses that everyone in Nemours is welcome to participate in. We do, actually I ran a flight school session this morning for some folks that are working on Excel pilot grants. We do this for all different kinds of pilot grants. We have what for historical reasons are still called mentoring and advisory council, but they're mock study sections really. That's an old term from Nemours years ago. Plus many, and again, folks from Florida that want to send their grants to us for that review, we can help with that. For that review of grant concepts and then individual components. The best time to use one of the MACs is when you have your specific aims page written to get some feedback on it. Mini retreats and workshops that we try to invite folks from Florida to attend, and we do new faculty outreach. Coming soon with the new funding, which we're expecting hopefully sometime later this year, we will have best practices in mentoring, and again, we'll advertise this in a way so that faculty in Florida can take advantage of them. And we're also, the pathway about clinical research that I mentioned with ISPCTN, there's funding in the CTR to do other pathways. So there's a bit of a needs assessment that we'll have to do, but some of the ideas for pathways are about investigating investigational drugs and devices, or whereas my favorite one is publishing amongst predators. So these are meant to be either coaching sessions or online tools for self-directed learning. The PDC has been pretty successful. The GIN, it's peer and near peer interactions in the MRDAs. And I just want to highlight that the MRDA effect, this graph on the right, has been sustained. So there's on the x-axis, that's the Excel grant year. We're now in year 10, so I can get the data from year 10. And that's the accumulated funding. So we've pretty much been linear with about, so the idea is, we think, we told NIH with 6 or 7 of these a year, we're looking at about $1.5 million coming in. And that is sustained over time. And we hope, we'll get another 5 years of that kind of funding. We hope that that trend continues. The CTR also has a bird core, biostatistics, epidemiology, and research design, which anyone can access. I'll give you the link and the QR codes at the end here. It's a short survey. They just want to know, if you have data, what kind of data do you have? If you're trying to design something, what are you trying to design? And you just tell them exactly what you're doing. It goes into a queue, and then it gets prioritized. So if you have CTR, Excel funding, your priority might go up. But I can tell you their bandwidth is pretty good, and eventually they will work with you. And I strongly recommend addressing BIRD. There's also a community engagement and outreach core, which holds annual community research exchange events, and there's a wealth of information about how to engage with communities in the Excel core. So if you're interested, there's 2 QR codes here. If you're interested in Excel resources, for example, the BIRD, which anybody can apply for, community engagement to ask them questions, or if you want information about pilots, that's the one on the left. It takes you to the Excel website. You have to log in. You have to set up a login to get it. If you're interested in the professional developments or the CPCRD and joining the GIN, which I highly recommend, that's that's on the right. That's Aaron's email address. INBRI is another one. Yeah, that's perfect. So there's an INBRI grant that stands for Idea Network of Biomedical Research Excellence, where CTR sponsors faculty. It's clinical and translational and getting clinician scientists up and running. INBRI is earlier, actually it's a much older grant. It's pipeline fundamental infrastructure with some pilot funding that they provide. Actually the INBRI pilot investigators spoke yesterday. So they have a number of things that they offer through their website. A key is they have resources, so cores, and an INBRI network, so a national network of cores. So if you can't find what you need to do, you can, the first stop is to talk to the cores at Nemours, or you can go and talk to the Heather Hardy's in both of these networks and try to find a connection with another state that may have the resources you want. There is a meeting coming up this summer, the NARIC meeting. It's Northeast Regional Idea Conference. So the folks in the Northeast will be going. Some of my mentoring buddies from other states are coming too. If you're interested in NARIC, that's the QR code. So this is a list of topics. The one that's in bold is the panel that I'm hosting, and that's to talk about best practices for the engagement and mentoring of clinician scientists. So I got to finish that. This is happening in August, so I'll finish the panel and everything will be set. But if you're interested in that, I don't know if this will be shared remotely. I don't think so. I think it's in person only. But let me know if you're interested in coming up, folks in Florida, or if you're interested in attending from Delaware. That's the only one that really matters, the one in bold. Okay. All right, and then finally, I'm going to talk briefly about 2 of the COBRIs, right? So remember I said there's 3 different kinds of idea funding. There's this 18-state national network that actually is funded through the Office of the Director, Clinical Trials, underserved populations, getting clinician scientists up and running. There's 2 statewide that have some resources that are accessible outside the state. That's the CTR, Excel program, and the INBRI. And then there are COBRI mechanisms, which stands for Center of Biomedical Research Excellence. Each institution in an idea state can have up to 3. Right now, we have 2 at Nemours. One is a comprehensive sickle cell research program. Andy Kolb was the PI of that until he moved on to Leukemia Society. So the new chair of pediatrics, David Rousseau, is ably taking over for the sickle cell COBRI. So they're a little bit in transition. They do offer pediatric pilot grant opportunities. Same thing I mentioned before about the pilot, like the money, the funding has to stay in an idea state, but the ripple effects don't. So, if you're interested, in the Sickle Cell Center and you're not in Delaware, you can contact them, and there may be a way to connect with a study that's running here. But that's a link for their site. They're in their seventh year, 8th year. So they're in their second iteration. The COBRIs have 3 5-year. You can go COBRI 1, COBRI 2, COBRI 3, and then you're done. The statewide networks hopefully go on forever. The other COBRI that we have on site now is called the REACH COBRI, Research Expanding Access to Child Health. There's 2, it's an MPI grant with Ann Kazak and Melissa Alderfer. They also offer periodic pilot grants in outreach. So you can get to the REACH COBRI site with that QR code. They have 2 amazing cores. You know, how you can use the core will depend on whether you're north or south, but don't select yourself out. If you think you were interested, you should contact them and then work with them. So JJ Coutuli directs the Pediatric Research Optimizing Methods and Stakeholder Engagements Promise Core. That's a great tool. So it provides training, referrals, and technical assistance in identifying engaging communities, and support through the community engaged research lifecycle. So the Promise Core, there's a quick survey that you can click on this QR code or on the link. It takes you a REDCap survey to get some information. That's the best way to contact them. Kincantor runs another one. They're really good at naming things. I will admit I am bad at naming things, but they have great names. So the REACH program also has an impact core for intervention methodology, provision and connection through technology that Kincantor directs. So that's helping with technological expertise and tools to implement equity-focused interventions and models of care. They do consultations also, training opportunities and connections to Nemours experts conducting technology-enabled research or with the technological expertise you would need. So I know there's clinician scientists here that are developing apps for their interventions that they want to test, and they're working with Kim's group to get the app implemented. Right, and then finally, there's some things that are coming that I want to make you aware of. I mentioned the ACDC. So I didn't name this. You can tell because it's a pretty good name that people tend to like. So that's the Academic Career Development Center. That is something that is spinning up out of the strategy that will infuse more resources to the kinds of programs that I've been talking about here. So that's more to come on that. Erin Regal is the contact for that. Actually, that's her main job now as we're transitioning her from the CTRXL programs in PDC. She's still helping us out. So she's the main contact for a lot of this stuff. But she's the program director for the ACDC. And there's a couple things that are coming. We're still beta testing them and trying to figure out how to deploy them. But one of the things the ACDC is working on is to get some centralized support for mentoring. And that's a infrastructure software called Kronos. That's unfortunately a name the same as our beloved Kronos, but we try to say Kronos. It's in beta testing right now. This software platform is used by a wide variety of institutions, including, I don't know if I have, AAP uses it, a number of big societies, large companies. Boston Children's uses it in some respects, and we talked to them about implementation. I think Nationwide, Houston Methodist was another place that we talked to. But the idea of its infrastructure to facilitate mentoring connections and coaching connections, and it's chipping away at that time investment, just trying to figure out who to talk to or how to get things done. So it's beta testing now. I hope in the next several months we'll be able to push it out for some additional testing with a broader group. And another thing, which maybe you'll never hear about, because if we do our job well, you won't, but it's going to float behind the scenes in a lot of our programs. That's a way to capture data on our faculty where we don't have to ask them, especially the same questions over and over again. So Flight Tracker is a set of REDCap modules. It was originally built at Vanderbilt. Now there's a big consortium. I think we were the 22nd or 23rd group to join, and there are over 40-something institutions now using Flight Tracker. So it's basically data sets that use API and web crawlers to pull information from publicly accessible data. So I, for example, and the folks who are in our beta tests for this, I know who's updating their ORCID profile and who's not because I'm pulling data from other sites and I can compare it to what they're putting in ORCID. So it goes out and it pulls information. This is a flow diagram from a few years ago. It's actually much more sophisticated now. And what we're hoping is that with help from HR, sort of onboarding, that we can get people into this system as they're joining. So there you go. There's a bunch of QR codes at the end that I talked about. And if anyone has questions, I am happy to answer them at any time. You can contact me or Aaron, and we'd be happy to connect with you. But thank you very much for your attention.